Tonight, we'll be talking about the source for people's hatred. Why is it that Judaism or Jewish people have inspired such negative feelings for so many years and so many centuries? Is it something related to a specific country, a specific time, a specific economic climate or environment? Is it something that's wrong with us, that we inspire these kind of feelings amongst people? But undoubtedly, we do. We always have, and we still do even in the 21st century. With all of the advances of civilization, we still find many, many people that don't like us simply because of the fact that we're Jewish. Let's call a spade a spade. So hatred for Jews is obviously nothing new. This is one of the oldest tricks in the book. You can go all the way back as far as Pharaoh, the Greek Empire, Nebuchadnezzar, the Romans, the Turks, Persians. It crosses any nationality. It crosses religions. There have been Muslims that have hated and persecuted Jews. There have been Christians that have hated and persecuted Jews. It's been in continents like the Middle East, continents like Africa, the Far East, Europe, even right here in the United States. So to try and label it a problem specific to one group, one ethnicity, one nationality, one culture is impossible. Impossible. And to try and label it to a specific time is equally impossible. You can go back as far as the Babylonians and the Romans that killed millions of Jews over the years, or the Crusades. You can move along and talk about Khmelnytsky and some of the Polish and Russian butchers. You can talk about Hitler. You can talk about the European expulsion of Jews. Any point in history, you can find a dictator. And last night I felt like we came full circle because now the dictator is a Jew. Nobody here knows what I'm referring to, but Sacha Baron Cohen, the actor who portrayed Borat, has a new movie coming out called The Dictator, and he made an appearance last night at the Academy Awards as the dictator, carrying an urn with the remains of Kim Jong-il, the North Korean.
He made it to the red carpet. He never made it on the show, did he?
Nut job. No, he went inside and changed his clothes back to normal. I think that was his condition.
He did? Oh, because
that was the
they
condition.
had let him in.
Well, that's why.
He behaved himself.
They allowed him to walk the red carpet, but anyway, he spilled the remains of Kim Jong-il. I watched the clip this morning. It's hilarious. But the point is that we've come full circle because now the dictator is actually a Jew. A Kohen, no less. Of course I'm poking fun, but it's a very serious and a real threat, a real issue that exists today, as strong in many ways as it has for many years. And in some countries, in the United States, you may not see it rear its ugly head visibly, but in Europe or some of the Middle East countries, it's still very much a real and consistent threat. Whether it be my colleague, the Chabad rabbi in Turkey, or what happened in Mumbai, or even now what's been happening with the Israelis being targeted in Thailand. And it's a very, very serious thing, very real thing. So the question is why? What is it that motivates people to hate Jews? You don't know.
I think whatever it was originally, I don't know, but now it's just such a taught, repeated, simple excuse to use at any point in time that it goes back, well, we hated them before, they were reasons before, so it still must be them.
It's possible, but I believe it's deeper than that. I believe that there's actually an innate and basic fundamental reason why people hate Jews. And you're right, maybe for children that are being brainwashed, a lot of it is simply based on what they're being told. But when you see adults, even educated people, exhibiting that kind of behavior, it leads you to believe that there is a real, definitive reason why people hate Jews. So let's talk a little bit about why. So I'm going to tell you a story. story happened with the CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz. Okay, Howard Schultz was also the founder. He founded Starbucks, was the CEO for many years. He left, and then about 3 years ago, he took it back over when Starbucks was experiencing a bit of decline. And he's done very well in rebuilding it back up to its strength. So Howard took a trip to, he's Jewish, he took a trip to Israel with a couple of other leading American businessmen. They decided they were going to go to Mea She'arim. Mea She'arim is the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem. It's a very isolated and insular community. And they went there specifically to visit a rabbi. His name was Nosson Finkel. Rabbi Nosson Finkel is the leader of the Mir Yeshiva, which used to be one of the most prominent yeshivas in all of Eastern Europe before the Holocaust. And subsequently he ran away. He survived. He's a survivor. Fled Europe, moved to Israel, and reestablished his yeshiva there. They also have a branch, I believe, in Ohio. It's a very, very prominent yeshiva. So these businessmen, not necessarily observant, decided they were going to go visit this rabbi. They heard that he's a very respected and wise rabbi, so they're going to go visit him. So these 5 businessmen pull up in the rabbi's study. They sit down, and the rabbi, unfortunately, is suffering from Parkinson's. But as you may know, Parkinson's is debilitating, and he was at the point where it affected him physically. He would shake and move a lot, and he couldn't speak clearly. So obviously, sitting in a room with a prominent rabbi in that condition, it made the businessmen uncomfortable. And so they naturally started to turn away and look away. And so the rabbi banged his hand on the table. He says, "Look at me. Look right here." And then he points to one. He says, "You, tell me what you learned from the Holocaust." The guy was taken aback. He starts to stumble and he's looking for words. He says, "Learned, never again." The rabbi looks at him and says, "You learned nothing." And right away, Howard is describing this later on. He says, everyone was looking to get under the table. There's this prominent rabbi. And he's putting them on the spot. They looked and they thought, in his feeble condition, it was anything further from the truth. So he calls the other guy and he says, guy number 2, what did you learn from the Holocaust? He says, well, we learned that people can do terrible things. He turns and looks at them and says, you guys really did not learn anything from the Holocaust. He says, let me tell you a story. I was there, he's telling them. He says, we were taken from our homes, taken from our towns, from our cities, from our villages, put into cars. No space, no room for civilization, no humanity, nothing. Then all of a sudden, they take us to a camp. They tell us it's a working camp. Of course, later we find out that it's a death camp. They open up the doors and light shines. People were blinded. They couldn't see because of how they had adjusted to the darkness and the emptiness of those cars. They get out. They get separated. Men, women, children. They get sent to a bunk. When we got sent to that bunk, there was 5 people in a bunk, 1 blanket. So that night, as you were finally getting to lay down for the first time in days, because the cattle cars, they were all packed standing, you had a decision to make. Were you going to keep that blanket for yourself, or were you going to push it around and spread it out as much as possible to cover over the other 4 people that were stuffed into these barracks together with you? And you know what we did? We spread the blanket amongst the other 4 people. And that's what you learn from the Holocaust. He says, now, you businessmen, go back to America and spread the blanket. Take that blanket that you have, that you've been blessed with, and spread it around. Because it's not yours alone to use. It's a very powerful story, without question. And obviously, only one that a survivor could tell. Interestingly enough, last week I was at the Florida Holocaust Museum's annual dinner, and Elie Wiesel spoke, which is an amazing tribute just to hear him. And he said the exact same thing, that what he remembers most, what he learned from the Holocaust, what he feels everyone should learn is gratitude. Not a typical lesson you'd think, but gratitude. But one of the important things to learn and understand is why. Not why were 6 million people killed, or why were people killed in the Crusades, or why were people killed in shootings and stabbings and hate crimes all over the world. Why is it that people hate us? And therefore spur on these calamities, these disasters. So the first reaction of most people is, when we deal with something that's very difficult and incomprehensible, we rationalize it. Right? It's easier to sleep with ourselves. It's easier to be able to function if we can take these difficulties and clarify them. And the same thing is with anti-Semitism. Our first instinct is always rationalization. How does this make sense in my reality? So in every time, we always take a look. Well, the reason that there's anti-Semitism in this specific time was because of the economic climate. Germany, the country had been torn apart by World War I. They had been emasculated by the treaty in Versailles. And so therefore, they had to find a linchpin. They had to find a scapegoat. They picked the Jews. In other situations, when you're talking about the Crusades, you'll say it was because...
There's another why.
What's that?
There's another why.
Which why?
Why the Jews? Why not?
I agree.
Someone else?
I agree. Absolutely. Well, the Jews are successful. We're not. They must be the source of our failure. With the Crusades, it was the fact that the Jews supposedly contributed to the death of Jesus. In other situations, it had to do with the fact that the Jews were in the money lending business, or the fact that when you talk about the Arab-Jew conflict, you say, well, the reason why Palestinians hate Jews is because we're occupying a place where they used to live. Right? But even before 1967, when they were, when Israel took over the West Bank and Gaza, even before that time, they hated the Jews. Well, you say that's because we've taken over their land. But even before 1948, they hated Jewish people. So it's true that we always try to rationalize that. In reality, in the early 30s, even before Israel was a visible reality, the Mufti, the head Muslim cleric of Jerusalem, was very, very close friends with Hitler. He visited Germany 3 times in the early 30s. What excuse did he have then? There was no Jewish government. There was no Jewish state. There was nothing. A couple of settlements and some guys with knives. That was it. So it's true this is always our initial reaction. But it doesn't stand up over time. In Stalin's time, Jews represented capitalism. And capitalism was the enemy of communism. Jews had to go. So the reality is, if you can find that Jews are persecuted in every time, in every economic situation, and in every climate, you cannot base it solely on these exterior and alternate motives. It simply doesn't add up. Do they contribute? Do they add fuel to the fire? Probably. But that cannot be the source of this hatred. There has to be something deep down, something innate, something fundamental that regardless of your station, of your success, you inspire feelings of animosity. At least you accomplish something.
And they told me I was good.
They say in Yiddish there's a term, it says, love, basically love me or hate me as long as it's about me.
Gee, that sounds like my grandmother.
Well, let's look at one episode, one specific episode. Of course, we're going to go into greater detail in 2 weeks. On Purim. What happened on Purim? We had the dictator of the day. His name was Haman. And Haman, incidentally, Haman was a descendant of Amalek, another sworn enemy of the Jewish people. So Haman comes along and he gets together with the king. Who's the king of the time in Persia? We're talking about 2,400 years ago. So a few hundred years before the Common Era. Who's the king at the time? Achashverosh. And Haman comes along to Achashverosh and says, listen, man, you've got a group of people in your empire. The Persian Empire was the empire at the time. This group has to go. They are a problem. They're not similar to the rest of society. They don't talk the same language. They don't have the same rules. You don't want them here. And Haman tells Achashverosh, the king, he says, listen, if you're worried about their contribution, their taxes, I will pay you. I'll pay you. I'll pay you 10,000 silver coins. Large sum. You know what Achashverosh tells him? Keep your money. You'll be doing me a favor. That's what he tells him. Keep your money. You're doing me a favor getting rid of these people. I don't want them here just as much as you do. That's exactly what he tells them. Now, it's true, Achashverosh is an anti-Semite, Haman's an anti-Semite. Nothing really in the story is mind-blowing. In fact, the two guys that don't hate Jews get together and he says, no, I'll pay you. The guy says, no, please, you're doing me a service. Nothing really shocking. But here is an interesting parable that the Talmud learns out from this story. The Talmud learns an amazing thing from this story. It says that this partnership between Haman and Achashverosh is like two people that own fields adjacent to each other, adjoining. Person number one, person number two. Person number one has a ditch in his field. Terrible ditch. Terrible, terrible ditch. Nothing to fill it up. Person number two over here, he's got a huge mound of extra dirt. No place to put it. What happens? Person number one is constantly looking at person number two's pile of dirt and saying, oh, if only he would sell me that dirt. If only he would sell me that dirt, I would be so appreciative. I would buy it for whatever he would charge me, that I could fill up this mound, this ditch. Person number one over here is saying, oh, if only I could rent that ditch from him or get that space, it would be perfect. Perfect for my pile of dirt. What should I do with it? Where am I going to put it? Finally, they work up the courage and they meet each other. He says, please, sell me your pile of dirt. And he says, what? Sell you my pile of dirt? I'll give it to you for free. You don't need I don't need your money. You'll be doing me a favor. This is the illustration that the Talmud uses to explain the dynamic between Haman, the evil advisor, and Achashverosh, the evil king. Interesting analogy. What does it teach us? Did you learn anything from the analogy? Not really. Furthermore, I would argue that the analogy doesn't even add up, because both of them are discussing getting rid of the Jewish people. So it's not a situation where one has something the other wants, and each one is contributing to the other. Here, Achashverosh says, Haman says, I'll get rid of the Jews. Achashverosh says, fine, get rid of the Jews. Who has a mound, who has a ditch? Doesn't add up. They both are getting rid of something. They both have a mound, they're both getting rid of. So why is it that Haman is compared to the guy who has a ditch, and Achashverosh is compared to the guy who has a mound? Are you trying to understand the question or the answer?
Yes. Well,
Good. As long as you got the question.
definitely maybe.
Definitely maybe. Did you get the question, Artie?
I heard the question.
You heard the question. We bring this parable to explain that just like one guy has a mound, one guy has a ditch, each one is feeding a service to the other. And therefore, neither one charges the other for what they're going to do. Right?
Okay.
That's what happens in the Mount of the Ditch. And we want to use that as a parable to explain the relationship between Haman and Achashverosh, the king and the advisor. Right?
Okay.
Except that they're not providing something to each other.
Which way I don't get it.
Good. So we've got the question. No problem. That's good. It's a great question. It doesn't really add up. In reality, it's going to teach you something that's going to blow your mind. Really incredible. In the way that we explore this relationship and the fact that Haman and Achashverosh are both anti-Semites, but both completely different kinds of anti-Semites, with different motivations and different forms of expression. And that's why one is a mound and one is a ditch.
Hold on to your seat.
I'm situating myself.
Okay.
Achashverosh, this is from Ben Yahu in the Talmud of Megillah. So there's an entire tractate, entire compilation of discussions just on the story of Megillah. It's considered actually one of the most interesting sections of the Talmud. So here's what he says. Achashverosh is compared to someone who has a mound in a field. Why? Because Achashverosh's problem with the Jewish people wasn't that he saw the Jewish people as being shallow, decrepit, lowly human beings. He saw them as a valuable nation, a nation with high intelligence, high pursuits, and an amazing faith in an amazing God. In fact, Achashverosh was nervous to attack the Jewish people because he knew that God would protect them. Which is why he made this big feast, hoping that they would eat things that weren't kosher, whatever, sin, do different things there, engage in promiscuous activities, and ultimately he felt they would lose their protection from God. He was wrong, but that was his calculation. But deep down, he had a tremendous respect for the Jewish people. He recognized them as an exemplary nation. Haman was exactly the opposite. To Haman, they weren't a mound. They weren't something that stood out, that was impressive. They were a ditch. As lowly subjects as you can possibly see. That's the way he viewed the Jewish people. People that didn't contribute to society, that had nothing to offer, that their only existence was to serve as slaves, and ultimately total annihilation. That's what Haman saw. And in fact, Achashverosh, because he didn't disrespect the Jewish people, he didn't disgrace them, in the end, did he die? No. Haman did. Because Haman showed no respect whatsoever. So that's why one is compared to a mound and one is compared to a ditch. Each one was looking at the Jewish people from a different perspective. So, Achashverosh was the mound and Haman was the ditch. What does it teach us? That each one of these individuals, both huge anti-Semites, looked at the Jewish people in two different ways and therefore expressed their hatred in two different ways. It teaches us something very, very profound. Anti-Semitism has both a body and a soul. It has two different, unique aspects to these feelings of hatred and animosity that are shown to us. And one is reflected by Achashverosh, the mound, and one is reflected by Haman, the ditch. So let's start with the body of anti-Semitism. The body of anti-Semitism being the external, more superficial antagonism that is reflected towards the Jewish people. For many people, even today in society, Jewish people are strange. They're strange. Why? Because they're different. They have a different language. And this is not a language that's designed or caters to a specific location. Right? If you look at other languages, they're based on a specific location. Our language isn't. We have language that we've been speaking for thousands of years, and in reality, how long were we actually living in Israel for? Very short period of time. So it's not necessarily an Israel language. It's a Jewish language. We have our own customs. We have our own traditions. And they're not just quote-unquote what people would say religious customs. There's cultural customs. There's gastro customs. We have very, very different ways of thinking, different ways of feeling. We have our own certain nuances. We are different. We're strange. We stand out, whether we like to accept it or not. This is the anti-Semitism of the mound. The mound stands out from the landscape. It sits for itself. Same thing as with the Jewish people. And it makes people uncomfortable. It makes people uncomfortable. When you have a group of people that stands apart, that stands different, do you respect them? Absolutely. Just like Ahasuerus. He respected the Jewish people. But it made him uncomfortable to have a group of people, a nation, that played to a different tune. It did not mesh with society. That made him uncomfortable. Because in reality, we like to believe that the way we are is the way everybody else is. And we can understand and categorize and put everything we see in this pretty little box. The reality is, it doesn't work that way. And when people see that, and they see a people that don't operate the same way they do, it makes them very unsettled. It unnerves them. That is the body of anti-Semitism. The external expression of anti-Semitism. And that's something that, whether you see an individual and he's a wicked, despicable individual, or he's just a guy. Even just a guy is capable of having feelings like that. Capable of having feelings like that. Even in the United States. Even your next door neighbor can simply say, well, why do you have to be so different? Why do you have to be so strange? Why can't you be like everybody else? And that creates feelings of animosity. That's anti-Semitism number one. Then we have numero dos. Numero dos is the soul of anti-Semitism. The soul of anti-Semitism is the underlying current that feeds this hatred. And that can be based on another verse from the Talmud where it says, what is Har Sinai? The mountain of Sinai, of course, is the mountain where the Torah was given, right? But the word Sinai is also an acronym for Yarda Sina La'akom, which means it descended hatred to the nations of the world. Essentially saying that on the day that the Jewish people were given the Torah on Mount Sinai, anti-Semitism was born. Right there on that day. They didn't do anything. All they did was camp at the mountain, say, sure, we'll take it. And that's it. Anti-Semitism was born. What possibly on that day could have happened to warrant people hating another people?
You've got something I don't have.
Absolutely. You've got something that I don't have. The
You
Jewish
were chosen
people,
and I wasn't.
the Jewish people were given a special task. They were given a special task, a special calling. And it started on that day. And as a result, we have always felt, till this very day, in 2012, and 57, 72, we've always felt the obligation to live up to a higher standard. Whether you translate that into religious involvement or not. You can see it in the way we achieve, in our success, in our determination, in our motivation, in the education that we push for our children. Heck, you can even see it in Hollywood. In every industry, we rise to the top. Not because we're better than other people, but because we feel an obligation to achieve, to produce, to lead, to shine by example. And that started on Sinai. Right there on Mount Sinai. That's when it started. We were called to a purpose, to a cause. It's not necessarily that we're better than other people, because when you say chosen people, people right away think, oh, that means we're better. No. But we've been motivated and inspired by this seminal event in our history. And a lot of other people didn't get that. They didn't get that motivation or that inspiration. They didn't get it from their faith or from their families. And guess what? That leaves a big, wide, gaping ditch. When you look out and you see somebody maximizing the potential of their life, you see them maximizing their faith, you see them maximizing their productivity, you see them leading, taking the bull by the horns, going to the Ivies, starting a business from nothing, building themselves up by their bootstraps. You have a choice. You can respond in one of two ways. You can say to yourself, that guy makes me feel uncomfortable about myself. He makes me feel worthless, like I'm not doing enough, like my threshold isn't set high enough. And if you walk away with that feeling, guess what? You're going to hate that guy. That goody two-shoes, right? The one that gets all the A's and the one that gets all their projects done. Or I hate that mom that knows how to balance work and family and she's got perfectly white teeth to top it all off. I don't like that. Why? She's so good, it makes me feel bad about myself. And who wants to feel bad about themselves? No one. Well, you're unique.
Gotta feel.
Karen's trained you.
Hey, I'm trained.
Were you saying that in this world there are more, the Jewish faith is more rewarding to more people than any other?
I'm not saying that it's more rewarding. I'm saying that it's a calling that we have taken very seriously. And because we've taken it very seriously, it's motivated us and inspired us to push ourselves to the limits. And for many other people, they have not found that motivation and that inspiration, and that's unsettling. Now, there are many people that respond differently. There are many people that look at that example and say, you know what? This is how much you can get out of life. This is how much you can accomplish and produce if you're willing to work hard and make it happen. So you don't have to be Jewish to succeed in any industry, in any aspect of life. But it is an example of what you can accomplish and achieve. And so people look at that example and they walk away with two very different opinions. Now, if the Torah felt that a person without Judaism could not be successful and productive, then we would tell people they'd have to convert, but we don't tell them that. We tell them, follow the 7 Noahide laws. That's what the Torah advocates. God gave to this world, to Noah, 7 laws that everyone should follow. Acknowledge that there's only one God in the world. Respect the Creator. Don't curse God. Respect human life. That means not to murder. And to actively help save lives. To respect the institution of marriage. Not to commit adultery or other promiscuous acts. To respect the right and property of others. And therefore not to steal. To respect God's creatures and animals, not to do them harm and not to eat a limb from a live animal. And finally, to establish courts of rule, law, governance. You need to have that in order to have a thriving society. As long as an individual abides by those 7 laws and motivates themselves to be the best person they can be, they're on par with anyone. But not everyone does that. Not everyone walks away with that. And it's true. Our tradition is a very strong, powerful tradition, Herzl. First of all, it's been here for many, many years, and there's a certain confidence that gives us, that we're carrying a tradition for so long. It's an all-encompassing life. The mitzvot help build this fabric of life, where we feel that life isn't just happening for an hour or two on the weekends. Life is all around us. Judaism is a part of who we are in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. I can't separate that from myself. So therefore, it permeates everything we do, even if you're not quote-unquote observant. But it gives you a certain bite out of life that other people simply don't take. They don't live with that sense of urgency. It's funny, when you go to Israel, people always walk away with that perception. That's true. There's an urgency, which is why they cut you in the lines and don't respect rules of the road. There is no customer service. You know, when you call and you get like a call center that hits 0 for customer service, over there they have like 0 and it just says service. There's no customer service. Eventually you'll get helped, but don't expect the same experience that you're going to get from that wonderful lady in Salt Lake City that's answering the phones for JetBlue.
Salt Lake City.
No, JetBlue is only here. They make it a point.
And you still, I guess my issue or the problem I'm having is trying to say, I don't see in today's,
Mm-hmm.
in my lifetime, sitting back seeing that a large percentage are feeling that heritage versus what you hear or think about all the other religions, the other majors of the world.
What I'm trying to say is that you may not always see it visibly expressed in necessarily a Jewish perspective, but the reality is that the successes that you see in our generation, which are unquestionable, successes as a nation, professional successes, even personal successes, are absolutely amazing. Not on par with any group, nationality, or faith.
I mean, I sit back and I look and I go, you know, maybe I'm just the outsider, but I couldn't tell you what Jewish CEOs or businessmen, you know, really be able to stand out and quote any more than what I guess would be the next guy that would be. So maybe it's more of a.
But if you look at the statistics, if you look at how many Fortune 500 companies are owned by Jews, or how many professional sports teams are, there's a reason for that success. There's a reason for that productivity. That is an extension of our faith, of our tradition, in my opinion. Whether those people are out in synagogue every day praying or not. I'm not condoning their behavior, but that is an expression of our faith. Absolutely. Without a question. It's part of the motivation that we've been given, dating all the way back to that moment on Sinai. To take the most out of life, to recognize that life, just like Karen said, that life is precious, that life is valuable. Those people, yeah, there are some people that achieve success without any hard work, but the vast majority of people that are successful work hard for it. Whatever industry they're in, they work hard. Generally, that's the way it works. And the reality that we have achieved success is because we work hard. We put in and we put in, we put in. And that is built on our tradition. That is built on our tradition. Not to take life for granted, not to take anything for granted, but to work hard every moment, every day, and get as much as you can, to lead, not only to follow, to innovate, to create. All of these concepts are built and founded upon our tradition. So absolutely, I ascribe that and attribute that to our faith. Whether they do or they don't, it's irrelevant. And you can naturally understand how that would set somebody off.
Win-win, but a lose-lose.
Absolutely.
situation.
We are.
No matter which way you go,
We are.
nobody.
No one's arguing with that. You're right. It's not. It's it would be easy for me to come in here and Karen and say the source of anti-Semitism is something that I've done. I walked around with a blue sock and a black sock, and frankly, that upsets people. People don't like to see guys with mismatched socks, which, by the way, is true. And that's why there's anti-Semitism in the world. It would be wonderful. We could get together, we could say this is the reason, we're going to stop doing X or Y or Z, but that doesn't work. Because there's always been another excuse, quote unquote, in another location, so it's not that. There's something innate, something integral. Whether you're dealing with an observant person or not, the reality is that anti-Semitism goes much further than that. You think I'm the only one that experiences anti-Semitism because I'm so visibly Jewish? It's not true. It's absolutely not true. You think CEOs or owners of sports teams don't experience it? Even with all their success? You're 100% wrong. They absolutely do. So it's not just a question about visibility. There's something integral that's based on there. And this is part of the reason. When you achieve and you maximize and you produce, which I believe is built on our faith, which is a compelling faith that pushes people to succeed, we don't shun success. We don't shun the material world. We embrace it. We always have. So as a result, we've always celebrated success. Within limits. We're not celebrating necessarily all of the physical pleasures that a person wants to engage in, but we're celebrating achievement and productivity and creativity. We always have. We've always celebrated education. Starting from that moment on Sinai when God said, I will give the Torah because the kids will be the guarantors. Starting that moment, we always celebrated education. So today, when our kids go to great schools and become Nobel Prize winners, that's an extension of that moment on Sinai. And people walk away from that and say, I don't want to be reminded of how inadequate I am. Every time I look across and I see that guy's mound, you know what it reminds me of? My ditch. It reminds me of my ditch. And I don't want to be reminded of that. And that's why I hate that person. Because they remind me of my feelings of inadequacy. If you look at bullying, today we're dealing with cyberbullying, which is a very, very real and dangerous issue. But if you look bullying on the playground 30 or 40 years ago, why do you think bullies are developed? Most of the times, bullies are developed because when they see someone, they get a feeling of inadequacy. For whatever reason, they can see a kid that's very smart if you're bullying and picking on a nerd. So you see a kid that's very smart, it reminds you of your lack of intelligence. When you see a kid that's wealthy, it reminds you of your poverty. It could be on. See a kid that's pretty, it reminds you of this. Whatever it is. And when you're reminded of your inadequacy, it doesn't make you feel very good.
I have it at work. And she went to Rowan's. That's the only thing we could figure out.
So again, why do we appease them?
That's a good question. And furthermore, do you know what the danger is? That, see, rule number one, or anti-Semitism number one, the external body anti-Semitism. You know, people can become antagonistic towards you. They can show, disdain for you. But usually it's kind of a balanced feeling, an expression of emotion. But when you deal with this, with the soul of anti-Semitism, that feeling of inadequacy, you know what it can bring about? Rage. Rage. If every day I have to get up and I have to look at this guy, and every time I get up and I look at Herzl, I'm reminded of how pitiful I am, I'm not going to be able to live with that. That's not something I can just go on with and just harbor my feelings inside. That's going to bubble over. And that's exactly what happened with Haman. Can you imagine? Haman is nominated to prime minister, number 2 in the whole Persian Empire. Everyone in the empire is required to bow down to him. Every single person, including every Jewish person. And everyone does, except Mordechai. Why do you think it bugs him? Because it only takes one guy. All it takes is Mordechai to remind him that he is a ditch. Just one guy to remind him of what he isn't. And that's enough to set him over the top. And that's what happens. That's exactly what happens. That's how the whole story comes to take place. After he sees Mordechai not bowing down to him, he goes to Achashverosh and says, we got to get rid of this people. He decides he's going to annihilate the entire people. Why? Because this man reminds me of what I am not. And that is a very powerful thing. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, Karen? Are you going to say, you know what? I'm going to shed my colors. I'm going to stop leading. I'm going to stop producing. Stop being successful. Stop being creative. Stop educating. I'm not going to do any of that. I'll retreat back into the shadows. I'll just try to be another guy or another. You know why that doesn't work? Because you forget that the people watching you, they know who you are. They end up hating you even more when you do that. I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. They end up hating you even more. If you're going to be a leader, be a leader. If that's who you are, then that's who you are. Is everyone going to love you for it? No. But be honest. Don't be a chameleon. There's nothing that people hate more than a chameleon. Don't try to be one of them. Don't try to be one of them because you're not. You're not. That's insulting to them. It's insulting to them. Be proud of who you are. Let them be proud of who they are. And by your achievements and your leaderships, you will motivate and inspire them to do the best that they can do and raise their levels up to your levels. That's the best thing you can do. If you want to know what it really comes down to, it comes down to this, Karen. You have to lead. You have to produce. You have to achieve. But then turn around and those people that are mocking you, tell them, you know what? You're making a huge mistake because you can do this too. I know. I believe in you. You can achieve greatness too. It's not just because I'm Jewish or because I'm smart or because I'm beautiful or which you are, Karen. It's because I work hard. It's because I work hard. It's because I have a high calling, a calling to be as productive and accomplishing as I possibly can. And that motivates me every single day. Day in, day out, morning, afternoon, and night. That's why I achieve what I can achieve. There's no special secret. I wasn't born with anything different than you. God gave me life, gave me health, gave me a spirit. That's it. The same exact ingredients that you have. And that's how you can turn these people around into believing in themselves. And when they start to achieve that success, then they no longer look at you as pariah. They look at you as a motivator, someone who inspires, someone who leads, not because they're better than anyone else, but because they want to help everyone else get to the same place that they've gotten to. The Rebbe once told a story about a Jewish person that was on a boat. Very wealthy Jewish person that was on a cruise. And cruise was traveling around the Atlantic Ocean. It came down for the evening. And this Jewish guy comes and starts walking around the bridge. He's walking around the bridge and he's looking up at the moon and the stars. He's perplexed. Finally finds the captain, walks up to the captain and says, "Excuse me, can you tell me which way is east?" Captain takes out his compass, starts to look. He says, "East is that direction?" "All right." Guy walks away. The next morning, he's back out on the bridge. He's looking around, looking at the trees, the sunset. Of course the boat has moved, so he's not sure where east is again. Again, he comes over to the captain. Same thing. Captain says, "No problem. East is that direction." So captain's kind of wondering. After the third or fourth time, he finally pulls over the guy and says, "Listen, I know you're not the captain of the ship. Doesn't look like you're charting a course for anything specific. So why does it matter what direction east is?" Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, he asked me. So he says, "Let me explain to you. I am a Jewish person, and I try to pray 3 times a day. And I pray towards Jerusalem, which is where the temple once stood, and where, God willing, I hope it will be rebuilt one day again. And that's why I'm constantly trying to figure out where east is so that I know which direction to pray. The captain was so amazed by the story. And here's a man, successful businessman, wealthy, accomplished, out enjoying his accomplishments with his friends on this magnificent boat. And yet he stops, and not only does he take the time to pray, he takes the time to find out exactly how he should pray, in the details. And he's asking the captain, he's doing whatever it takes because of how important it is to him. That captain walked away with a newfound respect for this individual. And you know what he said? I have to learn from that faith, from my own faith. There's something here that I have to tap into. An amazing commitment, an amazing strength that this human being has. And that is how we change people's hearts and minds. It's not by shedding our colors. It's not by walking away from society. It's not by pretending that nobody else existed. It's by acknowledging the people that are looking at us, the people that are wondering about us, the people that may already even have misconceptions and even a little bit of hatred. Don't write them off. Pull them in close, talk to them, teach them, tell them, and then let them make an educated decision. Will all of them come friends or admirers? Probably not. But you'd be surprised how many will. You'd be surprised how many will. But you have to give them a chance. And you have to give yourself a chance. And that means being proud of who you are. Standing up and saying, this is who I am. This is what I do. And anyone that's interested in joining me on this journey to maximize their life, come on board, by all means. The boat is big enough for everyone to get inside. Finally, one last story. I'm going to take you back for this last story to Haman and Achashverosh. They issued their decree, and it's not looking very good. Mordechai comes running over to the Queen Esther. He tells her, did you hear what happened, Esther? We've been decreed for annihilation. So Esther says, what should I do? And Mordechai tells her, I think you need to go in and see the king. Of course, going in to see the king without being called can be punishable by death. But Mordechai tells her, I think this is your calling. You have to go see the king. So what does she do? She fasts for 3 days. All right, now have you seen me after a fast? Imagine 3 days. So what would be the logical, rational thing to do? The logical, rational thing to do would be for her to eat a great meal, get the best makeup possible, do her hair, maybe her nails, right? That would make most sense. You're going in to see the king. Make sure you look as darn good as possible. But no. Instead, she fasts for 3 days and prays, and then goes to see the king. What does that teach us? Achashverosh comes in, sees her. You think Achashverosh was an idiot? Think he didn't know what his wife looked like when she was feeling well and healthy and all done up properly? Of course he did. He asks Esther what's happening. And Esther tells him, I was concerned coming to meet you, but it was really, really, really important. So I fasted for 3 days and prayed to my God. And Achashverosh is so incredibly awed by the faith that Esther shows that he tells her to come in, and eventually he grants her request. He says, ask whatever you want of me, up to half of my kingdom I'll give to you. We're talking about Achashverosh. This is a man that loves himself. Now, he doesn't know that Esther is Jewish at this point. But irregardless of that, he loves himself more than anything else. He's had one wife killed for less. And what has inspired him here? An expression of faith. This woman who's fasted for 3 days? And the answer is absolutely. Because even an anti-Semite like Achashverosh, even a selfish, materialistic, physical being like him can see and understand how much you can get out of life with a commitment to faith, with a commitment to a higher level of living. And that's what we are committed to. That's the life that has been chosen for us. We didn't choose it. Some of us do, but for everyone that's sitting around this table, we were born into it. We didn't choose this, but we have it, and it's a calling and an obligation to live up to. And many people will hate us for it, but even more will love us and respect us for it if we're willing to show them how they can achieve it too. That concludes tonight's discussion. I want to remind everyone that next week, Thursday night, Purim will be here in Tampa. It's coming Thursday night. March 8th at BIN 27. Please feel free to join us. And for more details, you can get that on our website at www.chabadsouthampa.com. Email any and all questions to askmendy@gmail.com. Next week, we'll be talking about defogging our windshields, trying to figure out what's really on the road ahead. Have a wonderful evening.